Did you receive a copy of the warrant of arrest as well as the criminal complaint that has been filed here in Fremont County in this case?
Yes.
Mr. Daybell, have you had a chance to review that criminal complaint as well as the arrest warrant with your counsel?
Yes.
All right, Chad Daybell looks a little skinnier, doesn't he? Arms look a little skinny in that picture. I'm just noticing the way he looked before and the way he looks now. And I don't know if he's been worried about this day happening, but this day has happened for him. He's in custody, under investigation, obviously, for something more than what he's been arrested for. Let's bring in the best team of legal journalists in the business, Ashley Banfield, Julie Grant, Ted Rowland's with me. Let's just first take a breath here. And Ashley, seeing Chad Daybell, where he is, with the stripes on, what do you think's going on in his head tonight? What do you think he's thinking about?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think he's been thinking about this for a while. I don't think this is all brand new and shocking to him. He knows that the attention has been fierce for months and months. And quite frankly, when you have human remains buried on your property, I don't think you should be surprised if you're arrested and eventually wearing stripes. I think what he might be surprised about is that he's not being charged with murder, but he should not hold his breath.
Yeah, what he is being charged with, let's put it up on the screen to remind everyone, as Ashley said, not murder charges, destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence, 2 counts, up to 5 years imprisonment. And, you know, I think that would go consecutive because it's 2 different humans, 2 different sets of human remains. But Julie Grant, these are the charges now. Obviously, this is not the end game. The other thing that struck me about today's hearing was the probable cause affidavit that is sealed, that they kept referring to, but only the lawyers and Chad Daybell and the judge actually knew what was in there. And it seems to me there must be some very disturbing details inside that affidavit.
Oh, most definitely. Aren't we all just dying to know what's in that affidavit, dying to know how law enforcement was led to the remains of the children? There are so many unanswered questions. It is absolutely sickening. Back to your first point, Vinny, yes, he looked a lot thinner to me today. I was thinking that when I saw his mugshot after they booked him. And, you know, this guy, I was looking at today, just kind of doing a little research about him, and I went to his website. You know, this guy wrote a series called Standing in Holy Places. And all I kept thinking about was that title. As I'm watching him in that courtroom wearing that jumpsuit, I'm thinking, the judge set his bond at $1 million. The only places he's going to be standing are either in a criminal court of law or in a jail cell until this case is over. And yes, I'd be losing a lot of weight, too, if I knew the FBI and several law enforcement agencies were looking at me. This case is far from over. And just a couple little details we got, just the egregious way one of the sets of remains was found tells us this case is perhaps even more sickening than we first believed it to be, Vinny.
You know, Ted, the more that I've had time to think about this and put some pieces together, I think I'm surprised it took this long. I mean, his background, this guy was a grave digger. So if they're going to get rid of kids, what's he going to do? He's going to dig a grave, right? And he's going to bury him. And he's got all this property. I'm surprised that it took this long.
Yeah, I think we gave those two way too much credit, thinking, oh, the bodies are at Yellowstone or something, or maybe they're with one of the cult members being taken care of. No, this is in their own backyard. He makes me sick. Looking at him and then thinking about him prancing around on the beach with Lori, those two are disgusting. They were out in love, getting married. All the time they knew that those 2 children were buried in the backyard of Chad Daybell's home. They've lied to their family and friends. I think the best place for him is in jail. I wouldn't want out on bond because I tell you what, people are disgusted with that guy, and I wouldn't be walking the streets of Idaho or anywhere else if I were him. He better stay in jail.
Yeah, isolated. You know, the other part is he's got, and we learned this yesterday, he has children. Some are in their 20s. One might be a teenager, but they're all living in that house now. Could you imagine living in that house knowing that there's 2 kids buried in the backyard? or were buried in the backyard.
And you think, and
All
they
right, the other
probably
issue
were
today-
giving Dad the benefit of the doubt. They were probably saying, oh, you know, he's saying the kids are fine, we believe it. Well, not tonight. They know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's victims everywhere in this case, but obviously the two ones we're thinking about are Tylee and JJ. One of the issues that came up, and it comes up in every bond first appearance hearing, is the risk of flight. So there were some arguments about that. Let's take a listen.
Because of what has been found on Mr. Daybell's property, should he bail out, he has strong incentive to flee. Clearly, this is the beginning now of an investigation into the deaths of children who are found on his property. And so that provides a strong incentive to flee. And we would ask that the bail reflect that.
Mr. Daybell has taken the initiative to hire private counsel. He has shown up to the proceeding today. Obviously, he's in custody. But Judge, when the police showed up at his house last night, Mr. Daybell didn't flee. Mr. Daybell didn't abscond. Mr. Daybell didn't run. Mr. Daybell's intention was, through his counsel, to turn himself into the court if that was something that was going to happen and address these issues. He has every intention of addressing these issues. He has significant family in the community. He has kids that live here. He owns property here. And quite honestly, I disagree with Mr. Wood. Mr. Daybell has every intention of staying in the community and every motivation to stay in the community and address these charges.
I understand, Ashley, that he owns property there, but that's part of what he's charged with doing here, is using that property apparently to bury children in. I mean, the bottom line is, what's fascinating about Chad Daybell is that he returned voluntarily. He didn't have to return from Hawaii. It was only Lori Vallow who was extradited back. He voluntarily came back. Should we read anything into that?
No, because Lori had to come back, and he's in love with Lori, and I think they want to die together, and I think about 4 weeks, because that's when the end of the world in their religion is supposed to happen, which makes me think he is a hell of a flight risk, frankly, because why not? Why not just take off to wherever you want to be when the end of days comes mid-July? You know, this whole story has been so appalling, and all I can think of is the Daybell kids knowing that the backyard had the remains of those children, and their mother was also exhumed. So now I wonder what they're thinking about their father with regard to the death of their mother. I mean, the whole thing is just so disturbing. And I think disturbing is a euphemism at this point. But, you know, one of the things that I should tell you, Vinny, is that I spoke with a forensic expert today, Dr. Larry Kablinski, about the remains, and specifically the remains of children. And what's most important as we go forward regarding charges, finding out just how they died and who did it to them. And this is what Larry Kablinski told me about that.
Even if it was a relatively short term of postmortem interval, if there's no soft tissue and you're only looking at skeletal remains, you may not have a cause of death so obvious. There may be no knife marks or bullet trauma to the skeletal remains. There may be no physical evidence of the cause of death. And so it's a very difficult analysis.
Can I ask you if there's, say, some sort of chemical agent or poisoning or drug overdose? Would that be evident in the skeletal remains at all?
It's possible to pick up some poisons or toxins, but again, you'd have to eliminate environmental contamination.
Vinny, there was a lot more that Larry Kablinski told me, and I'll tell you something that's fascinating. The fact that Idaho is as cold as it is may actually be a very good thing for the investigators and a very bad thing for Lori and Chad if they go forward and face murder charges in this case.
Yeah, have a huge impact on what those remains are like at this point. And again, that's coming up at 9. Julie, the more I think about the children, what Ashley was talking about, the children, their mother is dead, there's 2 bodies in the backyard. I mean, I've covered so many of these cases where one parent's accused of murdering another parent, and the last people who will believe it are the children. And I can't imagine what they are going through tonight, how their heads are spinning around. And I'm wondering if they are working perhaps to try to raise funds to bail out their father.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, certainly, he is their father. We can all, I think, safely, assume that they love him and, of course, are going to be standing by his side, just like he loves Cult Mom and stood by her side throughout, her charging and being locked up awaiting trial. It's just awful. It's awful. These kinds of things have destroyed so many different families, especially how, these two, Cult Mom with so many husbands and children. It's just dreadful. And the news that they all received today, the confirmation that Court TV got from J.J. Vallow's grandparents, and Ty Lee's, older brother, that the remains of the children are in fact J.J. and Ty Lee. It's horrific. It's the worst news they could have heard. And all day long, I kept waiting to see what we would hear from Cult Mom. Nothing. Radio silence from her, Vinny. It's incredible to me. I thought we'd hear something yesterday. Nope. Today, nope. I mean, and we know that nobody bailed her out. So who knows if the kids are going to be able to try to raise that money? I don't know. But to me, just what we know about this case, Cult Mom and Mr. Doomsday seem like two really unpopular and really dangerous individuals. And to echo what Ted said a short time ago, I think they both need to stay in jail pending their trials.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We continue here on Court TV Live.